Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Omega Insight. I apologize, I missed last week, so I'm just going to do the topic I was going to do last week on hope. The idea of hope and why is it important, and can it be the end-all cure to situations in our lives? Now, I recently published a quote that part of the quote had, hope means hoping when everything seems hopeless. And to me, that's a little strange that hope is the solution to hopelessness. I mean, if you don't have any hope, how do you end up picking up hope to prevent you from not having hopelessness anymore? It's a little bit of a quandary. So, how do we conjure up the hope when we feel hopeless? Naturally, that takes us to the idea of despair and depression and the concept that people say fake it until you make it and hope will eventually show up. I'm not really a fan of fake it till you make it. I know the idea, smile, and yeah, everything's going to be okay, but action needs to be required. Like we talked about faith. Faith is important, but we need to have action to go along with it. Now, when I think about hope, naturally I went to the definition, and as a noun, hope is a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. Like we have a picture in our mind and we want that to happen. As a verb, wanting something to happen, or the action of it happening. So we can be hopeful or we can have hope. So again, it correlates to the future. It's the idea that I have a picture in my mind of how I want the future to be, and I'm hopeful that that will occur. And we can have hope for many little things, like little kids wish it's connected to wishing. I think it's a lot like that. It's connected to the future and something that we want, like a desire, like a little child, blow out the candles for their cake. I want a pony, or I want a bicycle, or the latest game, whatnot. That's the connection to hope, that it's like a wish. But I also think it's like the desire for a better situation or an outcome for our future. We have hopeful. We're hopeful. We see it in the future. This is what we wish our life to be. We desire our life to unfold in a certain way. This to me is very important because it's as if we're instilling hope in our thoughts, because I'm creating it for those moments when I'm thinking about the future I wish to be. In those moments, I have peace. I have contentment. I have what I'm desiring. In the moment that I've created it in my mind, I've achieved it, and I feel fulfilled. I mean, naturally, this is one of the reasons why there was a big movement about visualization and positive affirmations. By putting it out there, you're creating it into the universe. That's one of the thoughts behind it, is that hopeful feeling, because in that moment, when I hope for something, I feel I have it and I've achieved it. And that's really where it comes to. And that's why it's so important to have hope, to bring us those moments of feeling as if we've achieved or we have a desire and it's happened. When we don't have any hope, again, despair, depression, all of those come into play. Hope is much like setting our intention. We're setting our intention for the way we want our lives to unfold. Kind of like, I'm very big on gratitude. When we have gratitude and express gratitude, it puts it centers our thoughts into something positive that we're grateful for, rather than all the other crap that's unfolding in my life. Well, let me just focus on gratitude. And sometimes it's very difficult to do that when we feel overwhelmed or in despair or things are unfolding. I just recently went with our grandson, was born 6 weeks early, so he spent 2 weeks in the NICU, and it was almost like every day something new was happening. Like he had jaundice all of a sudden, and then his lungs weren't developed all the way. They took him off the oxygen, then they had to put him back on the oxygen, and then they had to have him in the blue light, and then there was a possibility of him having CF because he failed 2 of his cystic fibrosis. He failed 2 of his tests, and it was just one thing after the other, and it was difficult to remind the kids to say, hey guys, just be hopeful. This is just one next step. It's one next step. It's grateful that he's in the NICU. They're taking care of him. He's got the best care. You want to have that, but it doesn't take away from, new parents and panicking. And unfortunately, with a new parent, when you have a child in NICU, naturally it's like you feel you can't hold your baby, you can't be there, and so there's hopelessness. It's the feeling of hopelessness. So that's what I just went through the last month of instilling hope in my daughter and my son-in-law. It's everything's going to be okay. Even if he ends up having CF, we can work with it. There's new medication that they have. There's things that we can do, and just being that, the voice in the darkness, the light at the end of the tunnel. That's really what hope represents. It's focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel rather than all the darkness around us. One of my favorite quotes, Eleanor Roosevelt, is, "It is better to light one small candle than to curse the darkness," which I completely agree with. I love that idea. Just focus on being the light and not worry about all this despair that's going around us. And sometimes this can be difficult. But when we do that, it makes the situation a little bit more bearable. Kind of like when you go to the dentist, you're like, oh God, you grin and bear it because you know at the end it's going to be better. That's what hope is. We know you get the cavity and, oh, life will be better, my teeth will be better once I have that taken care of. So, and I don't mean to be lighthearted about hope. It really is imperative that we end up using hope in our lives, that we strive for hope and instill hope in our thoughts and in our words. By having that visualization, again, this is another good thing about meditation. I love the idea of meditation because we're visualizing what we want. When you do a visualization, it's a form of meditation. We're visualizing the life that we have. People who have the boards, a visualization board, or this is what I'm striving for. Back then, a vision board is what it was called. Back in the 90s, it was very popular to cut out magazine pictures and put them all over the board of things you want to have unfold in your life. That was important, and that was a way of instilling hope in our lives, because when dire situation happens, it's hope that gets us through. I think about a lot of the movies that come out or books that I read. I love reading. I love philosophy and educational books, but my one default for pleasure is the youth adventures, where it's a young heroine or a hero, and they're in their teens, and life is tragic and evil bestows upon them, and yet they overcome. I love the way that it's written, that there's this hope that they know life is going to be better and it can't get any worse than this. I remember I used to use that phrase until it did get worse. But then it got better. Of course, if I could default to the Hermetic principle of vibration, everything vibrates and there's a rhythm to everything. We know there's going to be an ebb and flow. The planet shows us this. There's an ebb and flow. The water comes in, it goes out. There's an ebb and flow with my heartbeat. So when I know that I'm in a down cycle, I know that we're going to go up to an up cycle soon. And that's what gives us hope, knowing that it's going to be better. It may not be better forever, but it will be better than the moment that I'm in now. Anyway, those are the thoughts that have come to my mind when I think about hope. Is it a cure? Maybe. I don't know if it's the end-all cure, but I'd say it's definitely an important aspect of a cure, of a solution for difficult times that we have. I am not one to say I've never had a difficult time. I know despair. I know that feeling of dread and that feeling of like, oh God, how can it get any worse? I know that feeling. And I know when you're in that feeling, it's very difficult to look on the bright side. It's very difficult to look for the light because we feel so overwhelmed. We just want to shut down and not think anymore and not feel anymore. I understand that. And I also understand in those moments and in those times, it was the hope that got me out of those situations. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this or not, but Mel Robbins, I love her. She's a very, very funny woman. She was. I have a book of hers. It was a 5 minute, uh, 5. It was something about count to 5 to help you get out of despair. Well, now she has another one, the high five, where you high five yourself in the mirror. Because how often do we give ourselves a high five? Like, hey, we did a good job, high five. We don't usually do that. And I'll tell you, I really struggled the first few times when, the instructions are to go stand in front of the mirror and look at yourself and high five yourself, especially when you roll right out of bed. Hair's like, bah, you're sleepy in the eyes, you're like, ah, and you want to high five, yay, good job. But that's the concept of it, giving yourself a high five. It's hope that life is going to get better, that we're happy about where we are right now, and not focus on the dread, but focus on the hope for a better tomorrow. My quote, we had the facilitators all came up with quotes, and one of my quotes is, "It's my hope that our love for one another surpasses our fear of one another." And to me, that's a vision. It is my hope that we, as a human society, overcome our fear and find love for one another, and not be driven by fear, but driven by love. That's hope. It's a vision of a future that I would love to be a part of, creating and existing in. And by holding on to that hope, that gives me strength to go to the next step, to get up and move the next foot. A journey of 1,000 steps always begins with the first one. Hope is what gets us to move our feet. So thank you for joining me this evening as we're talking about hope. It is my hope that you carry on with hope this week, and take a look at the idea of what you're visualizing in your life. And if you're missing hope, what are some of the things you can do to bring it up in your life? What are some of the things that you can be hopeful for? Start it even as a wish list or a vision board, something to create for you to focus on, rather than be entrapped in all of everything else that is surrounding us. And if I could say one last thing, when I think about social media, and I don't want to get on the bandwagon here, but for me, social media robs us of hope, because we're so invested in that picture that's been taken of the past that we're not looking forward towards the future. And I think social media is one of the things that's causing and creating despair. Not to say that social media doesn't have good things. There are wonderful things that happen in social media. However, I'm thinking more about the increase of teen suicide and the stress that teens are going through, the amount of anxiety teens have. And there are studies that are showing that it's directly connected to the social media. That movie that was on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, I think is what it was called. I encourage you all to watch that, because it really does show what the social media is doing to our children. And it's my hope that we can rise above that and instill hope back in this generation that's dealing with all that they're dealing with. I know I just went off topic. So thank you again for joining me this evening. I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be in November next week. Oh my gosh, this year's flying by. Have a wonderful evening. Bye now.